constantly combined commercial, interest to have, for instance, you can have just some, kind of jock, just some sort of dumb jock can go and see Star Wars and go, yeah, Star Wars, Star Wars is awesome. Oh yeah, that lightsaber fight. Did you see it? Did you see how Darth Maul got pushed in the thing? Oh, that was awesome. Oh yeah. And then you can have a nerd watch. Well, nerd is derogatory. Well, I don't treat the word nerd as derogatory. In fact, I will have to tell you about my opinions of nerddom and how pop culture is possibly tampering with the nerd gene. But that's a topic for another time. Anyway, a smart guy, who likes reading about, the kind of guy who would go buy a book about the philosophy of the Matrix or something like that, right? That kind of kid sees Star Wars and goes, look at how the Force. Look at what George is telling us about the Force and how it compares to the. Okay, I'm starting to do my Shatner, but look at the Force and how it's such a philosophy and how it binds us and keeps us together. And it's such an amazing concept. And it's God, but it's God. It's an impersonal entity. It is the Force. It's an ambiguity that controls good and evil. And as Jedi or Sith, we learn to master our spiritual essence to control the destinies of good and evil, which we define for ourselves. Oh, glorious! I love Star Wars quite a bit. But anyway, so it's got that same thing. But anyway, that was a total tangent. But this is where Lucas, after THX 1138, he his friends, I guess, you watch the Empire of Dreams documentary, which I've seen so many times, just an enormous amount of times. And his friends kind of egged George Lucas on, who was just making these pessimistic type images, because talking about the type of artist that George Lucas is, he doesn't make narratives. That's not what George Lucas is best at. What he does is he puts together images and editing and that sort of thing. I guess that's what George Lucas is. He's an editor, and that's what he really was trying to express, was images and editing and motion and that sort of thing. And I didn't say emotion, I said motion. Emotion is when motion gets internetized. Okay, that was such a bad joke and so poorly stated, I kind of want to cut that out. So Lucas's filmmaking buddies egged him on and said, I bet you can't just make a film that's, sort of a sweet, silly comedy. So Lucas went out and did American Graffiti. And American Graffiti was a smash. It just totally banked at the box office, making Lucas like a millionaire. We thought that Lucas became rich after Star Wars. No, he was already rich after American Graffiti. And I have seen American Graffiti, and I've seen it a couple times, I think. Maybe once or twice, actually. Not too many times, being the George Lucas fanatic that I am. Man, I got more than any other person in my life, I think, out there in pop culture, or I don't want to say pop culture. Pop culture is a demeaning term as far as how I view the world, but in terms of science fiction, storytelling, my imagination as a child, George Lucas was quite an inspiration and a figure for me, and I've been personally fascinated with the man's life over the years, as many other people have been interested in that as well. So Lucas becomes a millionaire after Graffiti, and Apocalypse Now is a movie that Lucas is thinking about doing with Coppola, and he sort of gives that up to go ahead and do Star Wars, because, hey, American Graffiti was an optimistic, sweet type coming-of-age story, right, sort of in this adolescent comedy, homage to the days of George Lucas's youth, driving around as a car enthusiast, when the teenage mating rituals, as Wesley Crusher said in an episode, with all the cars back then, the cruising. So anyway, Lucas doesn't do Apocalypse Now, so he does his movie Star Wars, and he thought about at one point I think he was going to buy the rights to Flash Gordon and just make his Flash Gordon movie. But I don't know if, because he could well afford it. It wasn't a matter of financially he wasn't able to do a Flash Gordon film, because that's what he wanted to do. He was going to go off and make the Flash Gordon movie. And then that'd be that, and then he'd go on and do Apocalypse Now and just go on from then, make tons of films, right? But he didn't do Flash Gordon. I think he wanted to make his own original thing. I think that's what he did. So he began the script writing process, and George Lucas hated writing. He absolutely hated writing more than anything else. I think George Lucas isn't really a big fan of the directing either. Once again, as I said, he's an editor, and it's hard to. Yeah, I'll move on from that. But anyway, there's been several influences for Lucas writing Star Wars that's been attributed over the years, but I think one thing that hasn't really been recognized is simply the fact that George Lucas bought tons of comic books. He was just really digging and re-entering the world as he once lived in as a very young child, and he was just getting in that world again because he wanted to give kids something of the images and the things that were evoked back in George Lucas's childhood. He wanted to bring that back because there was definitely a pessimism. Yes, that's the word. There was a pessimism back around the 70s, And George Lucas was a natural pessimist, and that's why he made pessimistic movies. THX 1138, as Lucas said, wasn't a film about the 25th century. It was a film about right now and how everybody are on drugs and everybody are glued to a TV set. I don't know, I need to watch the movie, darn it. But Star Wars, and Lucas was going to make action figures, and he was going to make a lot of money off of that, he hoped. And sure enough, it completely worked, and he just slaved on that project. And, talking about, this is something that I've personally been thinking about lately. The last Star Trek episode that we did, the first episode we engaged, where no one has gone before. Oh, glorious. That episode dealt with, thought and the transition it takes for human thought to be accomplished through action. And, in that episode, we got so outside the confines of how the universe is constructed that gap in between thought and fulfillment was lessened. And just here on Earth, where, we're not out there outside of the galaxy, we've got to press through all of the things that are trying to keep us from accomplishing our goals. And George Lucas cranked out Star Wars like a machine. I mean, he really did. He would cut his hair and put it into trash cans. He had all these eccentric ways of expressing his anger. He hated writing this script. He borrowed all the plot points from the Hidden Fortress and just stole and took and borrowed from all these different places, and that's what ended up being Star Wars. But gosh, he just really worked hard, and his writing friends gave him advice, and it's just, oh man. But Lucas, it's easy for us to watch Star Wars today and think, wow, George Lucas sat down at the desk and he said, I'm going to write a science fiction epic, and this is going to be really great. No, that's not what happened. He sat down at the chair and said, all right, I've got to make money. I've got to earn a living. Well, he was a millionaire at the time, darn it. But, I've got to make more money maybe, or, I want to express myself. I'm an artist. I have to make this. And I have this, and I deal with this all the time, folks. The reason this episode didn't come out a week ago is because I was, you talk about how the second episode of this, One Man Trekker, didn't come out for 6 months. That's the same thing. Mind versus how you're feeling, how, all those types of metaphysical oppositions versus, the human soul versus the human body. It's, oh man. Okay, I'm really rambling. You want to talk about rambling? I'm defining what rambling means right now. Anyway, let's move on in the chronology, shall we? So Star Wars is a hit, and the rest of George Lucas's life became sort of tied to that franchise, and he couldn't really escape it he hasn't escaped it until now, until 2012, back in October. I'll never forget when I heard that Lucas had sold Disney. Hadn't sold Disney. He sold Star Wars to Disney. Sold Lucasfilm to Disney. I mean, that not only is that Star Wars, that's the whole package right there. I mean, I think one part of Lucas's life that we haven't, excuse me again, the lunch, man. One part of George Lucas's life that we often don't look at is the side of him being CEO of Lucasfilm. Not just making films through his own company, but being a CEO of that and managing all of the different